Hey, I'm John Hotchkis, and I'll tell you, I am in automotive wonderland. Thanks to James and the team from RK, we're going to have some fun today. We're going to see some awesome cars, talk about how to make those cars really handle and be great to drive.
Appreciate you coming out, John. Getting started, kind of wanted to get a little bit of your background for people who do not know. I know you've got quite the history with the automotive world, so give me a little breakdown of kind of your background.
Well, James, again, hey, thanks for having me here.
Of course, man.
My eyes are, I'm going crazy looking at all these incredible cars, and they're, you could come down and own, somebody could come down and own these cars.
Oh yeah.
No, I'm so lucky because I really had turned my automotive passion into my hobby and so on into my life. Raced cars for a number of years and so thankful to race in 24 hours of Daytona, 12 hours of Sebring, raced over the country in Trans Am and IMSA, raced a Le Mans in 1989 but the one thing of all the racing, the big thing, everybody had horsepower, and of course everybody wanted more. Mm-hmm. But in road racing and also in NASCAR and so on, you stick a microphone in front of the driver who finished second, and they say, "What happened?" "Well, my car didn't handle. I just didn't have the grip or the balance I needed." So I said, let's take those fundamentals of racing, of handling, of directional control and stability, and put that into cars. And muscle cars were just a natural. Yeah. Because in the early 90s, people who were just starting to know how great all these cars are, and handling was a thing that they lacked.
Yeah. I feel like that's kind of a blind spot for a lot of people because they spend all the money on the engine, they get all this performance out of the motor, but then if you can't really plan it to the road and you don't feel stable, you're really not going to get the enjoyment or the performance out of it.
And we're still saying the same now, almost 30 years later, we're still saying the same message. Make sure that you only have 4 contact patches and make sure that the car is doing everything it can to maximize the grip, but not for the sake of comfortable ride too. So great ride, great grip, great balance. Mm-hmm. And you're right, as new owners come into this industry, we want to keep that message going.
Let's talk a little bit about kind of the products you guys offer, because you guys have pretty much anything anybody could want if they're going to, either upgrade an existing suspension or completely overhaul and build a car out, right?
Oh, absolutely. And when I first started, we started with trailing arms. We started with getting more grip in the rear. Then we also did sway bars for handling, balance, then springs, and then these kits really evolved into our TVS Total Vehicle System kits. But now when people are restoring their cars, imagine turning the car upside down, taking everything off and replacing from the front bumper to the rear with all new suspension and really getting the maximum amount of driving enjoyment from that.
Yeah, and this is actually a car we have in stock right here. This Chevelle actually has fully correct kind of original suspension components, original engine, original drivetrain, but the owner wanted a little bit more performance out of it, so they've gone through and done the sway bars and a few other upgrades. Would you mind kind of walking us through and kind of talking about the benefits that you're going to get out of some of these components?
Absolutely, and this is the perfect type of car. I mean, Chevelle and first gen Camaro are number one sellers, but that's the thing. People will spend so much money, and especially now, the cost of paint job, the cost of interior is so high, the cost of any labor to make a car this beautiful, that it's just very important to upgrade the suspension, whether it's the full kit or as you said, James, with just certain items to make the handling better and more current.
Yeah.
But let's go look at it.
Okay, cool.
Wow, I tell you, this suspension is memory lane for me because I'm not sure when these parts were installed, but these are our same great products, just the stickers are different. So I know that these parts are probably 10 years old, and but
it's looking great though.
But they look good. Now here's the thing: when you have a car like this, we were talking earlier, people will spend money on the engine, transmission, paint, interior, but they'll forget about the suspension. And so 40, 50-year-old or older suspension just wasn't meant to handle today's tires, and even these tires are much grippier than tires of the 60s. So if you put a good tire on your car, whether it's a 15, 16, or even go to 18s, mega grip tires like you see on Porsches and so on, what happens is it's way too much for stock suspension. Puts too much load on the car, and the stock suspension wasn't designed for that. So you need to change the geometry of the suspension. Our bolt-on A-arms are just the thing. So it changes the geometry, makes the tire work correctly with negative camber, with the right amount of caster. So you've got great driver feel, but the suspension is doing what it should, where 60s design suspension just doesn't work with new tires.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, talking about the tire upgrades, because they were a lot more springy back then, the old style tires versus like the kind of firmer feel you get from these, right?
And remember and I'm sure you probably have some pictures or posters of that, kind of the old Goodyear tire or Firestone tire testing, where you see an old Chevelle or whatever it is, Mustang and so on, and it's leaned. I mean, it looks like it's going to tip over, and the tires are tucked under, the other tire is almost in the air. Well, that's the way the cars were. Back then they didn't know about great handling, and their goal wasn't a great handling car. It was handling of the time.
Yeah.
Now new cars are so good that when you restore a car like this, you want to have some connection to the car you drive every day. So better suspension makes that work.
Yeah. Now you guys offer actual shocks that are designed for specific cars, right? So
Absolutely. We have a great shock line. We work with Fox shocks. And if Fox shocks can handle a trophy truck going across the desert of Baja, they can certainly make a Chevelle dampen the spring energy of a Chevelle. So the thing is about shocks is they need to be strong enough, whether damping developed for damping the spring energy. So a car without shocks obviously bounces like crazy. You put a good pair of shocks So you put a good pair of shocks in, dampens that spring energy and gives you that good ride where you can go over bumps, or it's not too stiff, it's not too floaty, just right. And we do a lot of ride work to make sure that's what we need and what the customer needs.
Yeah, I noticed on your website you actually have setups for people to be able to choose even the things like engine. So people don't always realize the weight you have over this front suspension is going to make a big difference, and that's why you guys offer those kind of components that are designed for specific setups, right?
We do big block and small block springs. The height of the springs, the rate of the springs needs to correspond correctly to the engine. So ultimately you get that great stance, but really good ride quality.
Very cool. Now,
I have a couple of things to talk about in the front. When you're starting with a car like this, it's amazing, James. I'm sure you've seen them here. We see people that have spent so much money restoring their car, but even whoever restored it never did anything with the stock suspension, meaning it could still have the original bushings from the car. Well, what happens with that is that it's loose, so that the bushings, they're degraded from years of use and so on. Also tie rod ends, ball joints are not fresh and are loose. So what happens is you get in your car and you drive it, and the wheels are actually moving under bumps. The toe is changing, and just the track and the wheelbase is changing because of the loose suspension. So it's so important to get to, before you do sway bars, before you do any performance suspension, make sure that your ball joints, make sure that the bushings, everything that's stock, pitman arm, center link, everything is good, so that you can take advantage of great suspension. Because great suspension on old parts makes them even wiggle worse.
Yeah. And you guys offer, all those kind of things on your website too. You guys have a more upgraded material too than what was stock on these.
We really work hard to find the very best stock type of components, whether it's pitman arm, it's ball joints, it's end links, whatever it is. We want to make sure that they're the best, so that then you can build on that. It's like a foundation of a building. You have a good foundation of a building, good foundation of your car, then you can build up on that. But if you cheat and you miss a couple steps,
Yeah.
you just don't get that driving feel that you want.
That makes sense. Yeah, so you want to build that good foundation first, and
Yes.
then kind of modify off of that once you kind of have the foundation and figure out what the driving components are of that, and then, if you want to upgrade from there.
Exactly, James. Now, another thing is, in this car, we really recommend people say, well, I have my car, where should I start? It's obviously start with make sure all the great original components are new and fresh. Sway bars, springs, and shocks. You can do that front and rear. You get your car to look good. It'll ride better, be more it'll handle much better, and it's a great starting area to see how much better and the capabilities of a car like this.
Oh yeah, really lets you kind of like put the power to the road finally, right?
It does, absolutely. And then you can keep upgrading till you have a full TVS kit, and then a car like this will handle like a new Camaro.
Exactly. Yeah, it's incredible to kind of see the difference in the generations and how things have changed over time. Now, one thing I saw a lot of questions on was people who have a solid rear axle with, traditionally like leaf springs on the back. They kind of wonder like, okay, why do I need a sway bar, right?
Well, the thing is we upgrade the sway bars dramatically. So a car like this needs, let's say, sometimes Chevelles, Mopars, and so on, Mustangs, they didn't have a front sway bar, or it was a very small diameter sway bar that really didn't control body roll at all. So it could have a 3/4 or a 7/8 front sway bar. Well, we go to 1 3/8 250 wall. So it's a mega sway bar. It's really good. It's not too stiff that it makes the car dart around and so on, but you need really an aggressive sway bar because of all the weight of these cars. Well, if you put a lot of sway bar roll resistance in front, you need to then have something in the back that works in conjunction, meaning you need the front and the back of the car to talk to each other. Same in a race car.
Yeah.
You don't want to go into a corner and the thing understeers like crazy, pushes or oversteers and so on. You want good balance, and that's the same with this. So to answer your question, a rear sway bar of the right diameter, of the right strength, complements the big front bar.
Good to know. Good to know. What kind of setup are we looking at here on this one? Because they've clearly made a few upgrades from the stock components as well.
Oh, this is great. It's good to see this. So that we have our original trailing arms in here, our upper trailing arms, and also our trailing arm mount braces that back when this car was designed, this lower pickup point was fine. But now if you have stickier tires, it's much easier to build horsepower, reliable horsepower now with LS engines or just great regular generation V8s, whether it's a big block or a small block. Well, this mounting point here, it actually moves or flexes. So we use our trailing arm mount brace to take the load from the lower up to the upper, and so then we triangulate this area to strengthen and support both upper and lower trailing arm mounts.
That's a good point. So people usually only consider the components they're bolting on. They don't consider the actual stresses that the mounting points go on when they're actually under load.
Oh, absolutely. New tires where do they put all the stress? Right in here, right in the suspension and the pickup points. And this is great to see. So we have our adjustable upper trailing arms in here. You might be able to see those. And so it's easy to adjust the pinion angle so that when you lower the car down, you want to make sure that this driveline angle measured with the front is at the right degree, so that there's no vibration, so you have good launch control and so on. Easy adjustment with that.
Very cool. And so would you say this is a good kind of beginning setup for somebody who has a Classic already?
This is a great setup. Our rear suspension package, I would definitely upgrade the shocks because, again, when you do stiffer springs, you want to make sure that the shock absorbers are robust enough to handle that extra spring rate. But no, this is the way to go. This if we had this car and we went through some of the roads or handling circuit here without all our upgrades, and then had the identical car with the same, this one would be just a dream to drive comparatively.
Oh, yeah. And having driven this car, I can tell you, it drives great. So
yeah, no, this is a cool car. Really nice underneath, well presented.
Yeah, it's a nice mix of kind of the old school as, with some modern upgrades. So you get a little bit of the best of both worlds.
And that's another thing. We can see that the wheel and tire package on this one is much more stock-like, and that's good. I mean, we work with BFG radial TAs a lot to make sure that our suspension really talks to those tires, all the way up to the stickiest of performance tires. But I kind of like this look. I like muscle cars that have a little meat on the tires, and maybe they don't look full race or brand new, but there's just something about them. You go, hey, something's different about that car.
But still a little old school style, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Hey guys, so this video actually ran a little long this time. John had a lot of great information. We're gonna post up part 2 of this whole interview where we kind of do a deep dive into individual components with him. We're also gonna be following up with him on a later date to do some driving and learn a little bit more from him. So make sure to like and subscribe, and be sure to check the link below, and we'll be posting up some more here to come.